Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to yet another webinar session hosted by the Akshaya Patra Foundation. Today, the topic is feeding the souls and a human response to the pandemic. Maybe our panelists would discuss how they actually embraced the situation and how they dealt with the situation. Mr. Shantanu, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nilima, for hosting this really interesting and providing us a platform to do a little bit of a different kind of discussion. And when you first approached me, I was super excited because we are going to be talking to such a diverse set of people. On one hand, we have Sandeep, who is a classical musician, and on the other hand, we have Shridhar, who is a business guy, who is the CEO of the Akshaya Patra Foundation. I don't know how many billions of meals are being served by the Akshaya Patra Foundation, and I believe today is the 20th anniversary of the Akshaya Patra Foundation. So, Shridhar, congratulations for that.
That amazing. Thank you, Shantanu. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sandeep.
So I thought that, look, a lot has been talked about and about the pandemic and how it has affected the whole economy and probably changing the trajectory of the world. But one of the lesser dimensions about the pandemic is how it has impacted each one of us as human beings. And I thought that would be a very interesting dynamic for us to explore with all sincerity, dedication, and authenticity. And, talking about myself, when I first heard that we were in a pandemic, honestly, you don't hear this word very often. So I really thought, like, oh, this is interesting. There is a pandemic going on. And then somebody said, you go and watch that Hollywood film 2 years before they had predicted that this is going to happen. And somebody said, this was already there in our Shastras. 10,000 years ago, they had predicted that this, thing is going to happen and the new world order is going to emerge. And all kinds of, conspiracy theories are happening. I said, wow, this is an interesting time. And then it started seeping in for me personally when I started watching around me some level of doom and gloom and despair and people losing jobs and struggling. And within all of this sort of confusing narrative, there was this, you used to start hearing stories about how nature is healing itself. And overall, very confusing time. So not really sure about what's going on and how should we even react. And to start off, Shridhar, I'd like to come to you and understand from you, how, when you first heard the news that, when WHO announced that, hey, there is an official pandemic in the world, what were your first reactions and how did you internalize this whole piece of news?
First of all, Shantanu and Sandeep, thank you for taking time for Akshaya Patra. Truly honored to be speaking to both of you.
My pleasure.
Shantanu, I was traveling to Pune for a short pilgrimage to Pandharpur when this pandemic struck. So I was at the Bangalore airport and one of my friends had just landed from Dubai. And, we are close friends. And instead of shaking hands, he was doing like this to me. So... like instead of hugging and shaking hands, so I was wondering what has gone wrong. Then it struck me, oh, this is COVID time. And of course, for the initial period of COVID, I think February time, I think end December, early Jan, Wuhan had announced this, and still we took the chance to go to Pandharpur to seek Lord Vittala's blessings. Okay, and the first thing that struck me, Shantanu, was I think behaviorally, it may induce a change in us. Okay, probably we may have to adjust to newer ways of doing things, but I never imagined it will be, the extent will be this much, and probably we may have to settle to a new normal. I thought it will get, quarantine or located to only few places in the world. I never knew that it will become like this.
Sure, Shridhar. That's very interesting. So, Sandeep, if I may come to you, I know that, for a famous South Indian classical vocalist, your brain is wired very differently from other mortals. Definitely. Okay.
If I have a
So
brain at
probably
all, yeah.
maybe you're all emotion and all feeling. Maybe that's what it means to be a musician. But how does a musician think about these things as compared to as so-called lesser mortals?
Well, first, let me thank you for inviting me, Akshaya Patra Foundation for inviting me, and you, Mr. Shantanu, Mr. Shridhar, for inviting me to be part of this discussion. Very interesting discussion. Well, with regards to your question about how this sort of, when it came and how it affected somebody like a musician or any artist, I guess, it was interesting because I think going back a little bit in Jan, I had taken a trip to the US to attend a friend's wedding, a very close high school friend of mine, childhood friend of mine. And he's Chinese. And so his family, a lot of extended family of his had come from China. And none of us really thought much about, we knew, of course, about this virus that had come up and was being talked about in the news. But as Mr. Sridhar mentioned, we didn't think that it would come to us. So we were in that sort of a state at that time. And I remember my friend's father making the speech in the wedding. And he said, thank you to all of the relatives who have come from China. Don't worry, nobody has come from Wuhan, so it's okay. You know, he made a joke about it. That was a time when people were still sort of joking about the virus. And I think it was before it became something much more serious. Then in February, I was traveling with my wife. We had gone to Jaipur, much kind of like an overdue holiday. We wanted to go last year and something kept happening. We couldn't go. We wanted very badly to visit Jaipur. And I remember that we were in Jaipur catching a flight and there was news saying the first case in India is in Jaipur. We said, what? Of all the things, you know, I don't know if that was true or not, but that was what one media outlet was saying. And I said, we don't even live here, but we have all the places to visit. We visited the one place which now they're saying there's a case of corona. So it was just so weird. And then we continued traveling a bit through March. And it was that time, as Mr. Shridhar says, that people then were saying, okay, we need to social distance. They're saying keep 6 feet from other people. And wearing a mask was not so common back in Feb and March. But people generally were like, oh, we're supposed to maintain 6 feet and wash your hands and have sanitizer. But we were not following those things as much yet. When it really hit and when we really knew, okay, this is something, was probably when one by one, our concerts started getting canceled. My travel to the US, I was supposed to go again in April. That got canceled just 1 week before that festival I was supposed to attend and perform. My flight got canceled. So one by one, things got canceled and we said, okay, this is getting real now. And I was supposed to go to Australia in June and New Zealand in July, August, and that got canceled, you know, as things approached. So it was that we knew it was happening, but the seriousness of it just kept getting more and more with each passing week. And we had a lockdown and then we had an opening up and then another lockdown. And then with all of those phases, we realized, okay, this is something more serious, and domestic concerts got canceled, international concerts got canceled, and then we really took a hit and had to figure out how do we cope with this, how do we adapt. So
yes, indeed, Sandeep, all of us have this story about, you know, what was our first reaction to when we heard the pandemic. But as the, you know, realization sort of seeped in, and I remember that I was, sitting in my house, and then this news flashed all over the different apps and the screens that the Prime Minister is going to address the country. I think it was at 8 p.m. And when he first announced that please stay where you are, okay, and that was sort of the beginning of this lockdown. And he compared the pandemic to like a battle of the Mahabharata. One thing, keep that, we don't, right? And while we had heard of this news that something, big is going to happen, in India, the lockdown happened very early. And Sridhar, I really want to ask you, because you run a massive organization that impacts the daily lives of literally millions of kids. And all of a sudden, when there was a break, and people were just asked to stay at home. And one fine morning, you said, I can't go to work anymore because everything is locked down. As the CEO, everybody must be looking at you for answers. Like, what are we going to do now? How are we going to function? And everything going to get disrupted. So, how did you deal with this really huge, challenging time?
So, Shantanu, very interesting question. Just before COVID struck, or I would call Black Swan struck, Akshaya Patra was feeding 1.8 million children every day in over 19,000 plus schools across the country, 52 locations. And when COVID struck, the schools came to a screeching halt. But what Akshaya Patra did, which is, I would say, compliments to my team and the leadership team and all of our colleagues who work in different locations, we quickly repurposed ourselves from the strategy of food for education to food for relief.
Mm.
So that was a big repurposing and strategic shift that happened in Akshaya Patra. And today we have fed over 100 million servings during the pandemic time with the help of central government, state governments, and various donors who came forward. And Akshaya Patra is also part of the National Disaster Recovery Response Mechanism of the Union government. So whenever disaster strikes, Akshaya Patra is put into use. And we were very happy because at the end of the day, Shantanu, we are doing God's work. Okay, we are feeding God's children. So we felt this is an opportunity for us to raise up and do our best in feeding the needy people. So we had many of our kitchens, we struggled to mobilize people because at pre-COVID level, we used to handle about 400 tons of food raw material every day. So now everything had come to a stop. How do you reorganize yourself? That was a big challenge, and probably I can write a case study on it. And probably the fourth case study from Harvard will come out if you're able to do this. So I think compliments to my team, the missionaries who are involved with Akshaya Patra, and the government, all of us put our head together. We created a WhatsApp-based war room. And so we had the civil servants, bureaucrats, top bureaucrats of the state, all on the WhatsApp, and we were able to coordinate, and we did our best. I would still say that a long way to go because the country has got into deep trouble. I'm told 1 in 3 has lost a job, and food insecurity has become too much now in the country. But we at Akshaya Patra are all geared to ensure that, see, our vision is no child in India will be deprived of education because of hunger. Probably at this stage, I would like to rename the vision for a temporary period, no one goes hungry. So with that enthusiasm, we are working. And we have a fantastic team in Akshaya Patra. 7,000 plus of us, all of us get together in the morning to see how we can ensure a hot, nutritious, safe meal to children and now to needy people. So we have excellent, hot responses from different locations in the country, Shantanu. I also would like to tell you that when we did the relief work in Northeast, we have a kitchen in Assam. So near Guwahati, we were feeding. We were giving dry ration boxes. 3 orphan girls reached out to the local municipality, and I told them that we don't have any food to eat. Everything has come to a standstill. So the municipal people reached out to us, and we delivered 3 large ration boxes which can serve 21-day meal for these children for 2 meals. And these kids had tears in their eyes, and they were holding the boxes, very close to their hearts. And these are the moments, Shantanu, you realize what is the power of a meal. Because a person like all of us, if you look at, we take meal for granted. Because when you're hungry, either there is someone at home to give you food, or you have resources to buy food, In fact, it's an auto response mechanism for us, right? Only when you're deprived of grains or water, you realize the importance of what it means to give a meal. So I think for me personally, it was a big eye opener. And you won't believe, Shantanu and Sandeep, over 100,000 people supported us online, monetary support in a span of just 3 months. And several hundreds of corporates on their own reached out to us. So I felt, if you look at the other side of positive side of the whole thing, probably the compassion went up in our country. And a lot of youngsters, they came forward to support us. And I personally feel all this is happening for good, and India will emerge much stronger.
So, Shridhar, very interesting. Of course, the story of how Akshay Patra has responded is pretty legendary, and I'm sure one day the Harvard Business School will do yet one more case study on this. But there was an interesting comment that you made that you are doing God's work, and therefore there was an internal spiritual sort of driving factor that was propelling you to do it. But a lot of people also said that the pandemic is also God's work. So how do you reconcile these two opposites together? So was God intending to, kill millions of people? Were there bad people who are getting killed? So all kinds of, we are all confused about this. Was it done so that Akshay Patra could actually reach out and repurpose this mission? What's the big universal plan here, according to you?
So, Shantanu, let me give you my personal view, okay? Let's take a farmer in a village, right? He prays for rain, okay, to God. The water prays for sunlight, right? Okay. But both of them get based on their karma. Okay? So God, in my view, God doesn't interfere with pandemic or anything. It is what we have done comes back to us. So even within this pandemic, you may see someone's wealth has gone up by $30 billion. Right? Someone has lost job. Right? During the pandemic, someone is announcing a $3 trillion IPO. During the pandemic. Right? So my view is, this is our doing. Whether it was man-made or not man-made, that's a different thing. We are paying for what we have done, knowingly or unknowingly, and God is just sanctioning based on your karma.
Great, Shridhar. So you belong to, there are many schools of thought. So it's glad to see that your school of thought is that, look, we upon ourselves, and this is some kind of a natural cleansing that is going on. We will come back to, that interesting thought about how, as a race of human beings, we've tried to rationalize, internalize, and justify the pandemic. But Sandeep, coming to you, in quarantine, nowhere to go. Certainly, my own consumption of content went up dramatically. So how many countless hours I have spent watching movies on Netflix or discovering new artists on Spotify. As a musician, do you think that this gave people a chance to slow down a little bit and allow them to explore this sort of, many dimensions of humanity, like, music or their hobbies, or people started cooking and started doing spiritual reading, for example, which they had never done in their whole life because they were so busy working. So when the world paused down, do you think, our sensitivity towards some of these fine arts actually went up?
I think that the sensitivity went up, the demand certainly went up, because I remember when the lockdown started, the first 1 or 2 weeks was so confusing. People didn't know, is it just going to be 2 weeks? Is it going to be 3 weeks? Is it going to be 2 months? We had no idea. And in fact, more of us thought it's just going to be a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. That's what we all were thinking. And okay, it's a quick pause. It's a quick forced vacation. stay-at-home vacation. So most musicians, at least, were enjoying the first 10 to 15 days. And then I think when we realized that it's going to be longer than that, nobody could just sit still. So immediately you saw, even within the 2 weeks, you saw so much of the social media posting of music, whether it was practicing at home or doing a Q&A type of a thing with the fans, or live Instagrams and Facebooks and all of those things. It was kind of, it was almost too much. In fact, after 2 or 3 weeks of that, I myself stopped doing it. I said, there's too much content out there. And like you said, people, I think all the Netflix and Amazon subscriptions all went through the roof. They said it shot up because people were at home. So the demand for content certainly went up. I think that people's sensitivity towards music, arts, or whether it was reading, whatever it was is probably very individual. And I'm not sure, I don't want to say that it went up or went down. Maybe just based on the demand alone, you could assume that it did go up and there was more people who were turning to things like music or to dance or to reading, whatever it may be, literature. Probably people were turning to different things that normally they don't have time for, right? They're used to waking up, going to office, coming back, and having so many other pressures. Well, now a lot of those things are all shut down around the world. So they have the time to open up and look at other things. So I'm sure that they did. It was quite interesting, though, for me. And as Mr. Shridhar said, there's something essential about food, right? That's the most essential thing, is food, and you can say water, and then shelter. Something like music is not essential to daily life. It's something which is nice, and some take it as an entertainment, some take it as a stress relief, some take it as part of their spiritual process or their meditative process, whether it's the artist or the listener. But we are not essential in that sense to life on a daily basis. So we also kind of had to figure out, where do we fit into this? What do we do? And it's very interesting because there's no right answer. Some musicians just said, okay, you know what, I'm just going to take this time off, and that's okay. And then some said, well, I'm going to use this time to connect with a lot of people out there online, and that's okay. And then some people completely devoted themselves into fundraising and doing relief work in different ways, whether it's just through funds or whether it's actually out there physically on the front lines giving out food and other essential items. And I think there was no right or wrong answer, but it was a very interesting time because of that. Personally, like I said in the beginning, I did some online things, and then I kind of got a little bit bored because a lot of the content was out there and there was just too much. And I felt, okay, let's just wait and see what happens. And let's also just start to work on some more quality professional content rather than just going live every day or just recording something at home and on the phone or the laptop and putting it out there for the sake of putting it out there. Another thing which I was involved in, though, is an organization called GCMA, the Global Carnatic Musicians Association. And being on the committee there, we realized very quickly that artists also need help. And as Mr. Shridhar pointed out, many of us have that luxury of having food on the table every day. Somehow or the other, we won't go hungry, and touch wood, knock on wood, that many of us will not. But many of us were out there, including musicians who are not so fortunate. So we wanted to ensure that they would have the relief that they needed. And so we started doing fundraising. We got donations from the US, from within India. And we did fundraising concert programs online, which featured artists from India, from outside, and had a variety of artists of all instruments, Nadaswaram, tabla artists, veena, flute, vocal, violin, everything. Featured more than, I think, 150 artists across the concert festivals, 2 major festivals. And we were able to raise and distribute over 50 lakhs. That was something which we just had to put together within, a couple of months. And that was a fantastic achievement of GCMA. And I'm so proud to be associated with them. And they're continuing to do a lot of great work. But it's been very confusing. Every week something is different. Every week we reassess. Okay, so am I still working on something online? Or is somebody starting a live concert? Is somebody out there needs help? What am I doing? Am I an artist today? Am I helping somebody? I don't know. It's so confusing. Even now, I don't know what to say. Like the role of the artist has just been changing every day, every week, every month.
I want to make a point on what Sandeep just mentioned. And Sandeep, you're glad to know this. Sandeep, first of all, I normally hear your Margari Maha Utsavam renditions.
Yes. Okay.
They are fantastic.
Thank you.
And you'll be glad to know, Sandeep, we run a program called National Endeavor for Student Transformation, which is beyond the meal program, in which we help children to develop their hobbies and interests, etc. So last year we trained about 3,200 children, their hobbies, and you won't believe 2,400 of them enrolled for music.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's awesome.
Okay. And so we need more people like you. I personally believe music heals, and probably we should think of music for meals.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I would love to be part of it. We'll do something. Yes.
Okay. Right.
So Shridhar, I'm glad to discover you're also a budding poet. Music heals and music for meal. Sounds fantastic. There is a connection between the two of you, because you have food for the body and Sandeep has food for the soul. And I think both of these things are really important. And I think the world and humanity in particular, we've been running around material things, increasing our list of possessions, making sure we have a good job, and then working 14 hours a day to get the next promotion and so on. And somewhere in this pandemic, a whole counter narrative emerged. I don't know where it emerged from, but people started talking about things like, do we need so much to live? What do we need finally, end of the day? We just need, one meal, and we need peace of mind, and we need happiness. So all of a sudden, as the pandemic started increasing, this chorus around the world, which we see in social media and people posting and, doing, suddenly people said, look, maybe we need less. Maybe less is better. Right. So, Shridhar, I mean, I know Akshaya Patra is a sort of spiritually driven organization, but what was your own reaction to the fact that, because you shifted from the corporate sector, where there is a mad rush for shareholder returns and money and next quarter and so on, and now you're at the other end of the spectrum, where it's all about helping people. So, do you think the pandemic also helped us reconcile some of the really difficult questions for ourselves about how much is enough? And what is the purpose of human existence, and what are we doing here?
So very, insightful and deep question, Shantanu. Thank you for asking this. Okay, see, personally, in my case, Shantanu, where I'm working for the last 30 years. Okay, so 15 years, 16 years with corporates, leading corporates, multinationals, and last 15 years with Akshaya Patra. If you look at these two, if you come to Akshaya Patra, we work like a corporate. But if I were to describe Akshaya Patra as a person, Akshaya Patra is a person whose mind is of a corporate and heart of a not-for-profit, compassionate not-for-profit. One reason why I shifted from corporates to Akshaya Patra, because Akshaya Patra gave me purpose of life. I realized during this transition, Shantanu, that all of us are. There's one common factor, whether it's a Carnatic vocalist or an education guru or a big businessman, any person, all of us are looking for one common thing, and that is happiness. Whether it's a beast, animal, human being, all of us looking for one common thing. And it so happened that I met a professor at Harvard Business School 2 years back. He was telling that there is a connection between happiness and giving. When you give, you become more happy. Okay. So I think purpose, as you rightly mentioned the question, probably each one of us during this pandemic time need to do some soul searching and ask oneself why I am doing what I am doing. When Akshaya Patra has got Great Place to Work certification for 4 years in a row. So when we got for the first time, there is something called the Greatness Diary. So the interviewer asked me, if there is one question, if you would like to ask your 7,000 employees, what is that? So I told them that I would like to ask, please ask yourself why you are doing what you are doing. And probably if we get this, then whether I need 2 rotis, 2 cars, 4 cars, a big island, all those things will get addressed. Okay. Personally for me, helping these children realize their dream, giving their wings to a dream, I think no corporate can give me this kind of happiness, what I got in Akshaya. And at the end of the day, I'm looking for happiness.
So obviously you shifted to Akshaya Patra much before the pandemic. So you had some foresight about what's going to happen to the world. So you quickly shifted to where the happiness index was higher. So definitely you had some premonition about what's going to happen to the world. but I want to go a little deeper, Shridhar, if you permit me. The way we are wired to think from the time we are born, it's about this whole being competitive in the world, about success, about achievement. And everybody does it. Even for musicians, probably there are awards that they want to win. There are A-class concerts that they want to do. They probably measure how many million views or they get in their music videos and so on. And there is a hierarchy. For example, you filled up this thing about great place to work. It's a great honor to get it, but it's a severe competition. Everybody is fighting to get that title, and there is competitiveness in the world. How do you imagine a world where people become content with who they are? Because this pandemic lasts long enough, it might bring about a permanent change in how we think about the world around us. And people may start feeling a little more rested in their competitiveness to move ahead of somebody else. Because we are so used to measuring ourselves through numbers. Or we served 100 million people, or we did 1.3 billion meetings, or we got 4 case studies in Harvard. These are all achievements that we put on our shoulder and say, we are great because of these numbers that we achieved. So in a world where people stop thinking about these numbers and genuinely become more compassionate, how do you imagine this kind of a world, Shridhar? Because it's going to be a very different world, right?
So let me slightly take a detour, but will bring to what you are saying. What I'm telling you had a deep impact on me. So suppose, Shantanu, you have to cross a wall which is pretty high, okay? And if I were to tell you this is the ladder, you need to make the ladder, and you have to cross this wall. Your intelligence quotient will tell you what should be the length of the ladder, and based on your height, the difference between the steps. Okay? And then you'll calculate the height and then make the ladder. Your emotional quotient will tell you, I will cross this wall. I'll make it happen. Then there is third quotient which many people forget. This is the spiritual quotient. Spiritual quotient, when I'm talking, I'm not talking about religion here. Spiritual quotient is the question, is this the right wall to cross? So that is the first point I want to make up. Second is, I personally believe, as a young boy, someone told this to me, or I read somewhere, that you can go out and achieve very big things if you are not concerned who gets the credit. Third point, I was talking at IIT Roorkee, Shantanu, some time back, and after my talk, few young boys and girls came to me and they asked me about competition. They said, IIT is so much of competition. So I told them, see, competition per se is not bad, but with whom you are competing is very important. The best competition is to compete with your own self, okay, in the right direction. Try to improve yourself for the right things, good values, improve yourself. If you are going to measure yourself in terms of how many Harvard Business School case studies I got, or how many bungalows I've got, how many cars I've got, there is no end to it. At the same time, what gets measured gets done. And what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. So it's very important that we measure the right things. For example, I told you we feed 1.8 million children. So I would like to measure my plan how to reach 5 million children. And my next plan, I was talking at the IAS training academy some time back. One young IAS training officer, about 110 of them were there. And they asked me this question, Shridhar, 2020, you want to do this many million meals. What do you want to do by 2040? The young, smart guy, he stood up and asked this question, maybe in his 23, 24 years of age. So I told him our future is very bleak. We want to close down Akshaya Patra by 2040. Because by the time, hopefully, there won't be a single hungry child in this great country called India. So you can race, but you can race for being extinct. You can race for becoming irrelevant. And you can race for something good. The competition per se is not wrong. Competing for the right thing, I think, is what I would, and competing with your own self. Not putting down others, but competing in your own self, so bettering yourself in what you want to do. For the right thing, for the right wall to cross.
So there's a lot of wisdom, I think, in what you have said, Shridhar, and I can be sure that when this panel discussion goes viral online, people will keep rewinding and listening to these pearls of wisdom that you've just given us. It'll take me some time to digest the enormity of all the wonderful things you said. But Sandeep, I want to come to you with a slightly different perspective. Musicians, of course, well, they might be competitive and so on, but they are very creative people. And when we think about classical musicians, we talk of words like sadhana and dedication and invoking sort of some of our most primal emotions and feelings. At least, in the north part of India, there is a saying that when Tansen used to sing, he had the power to bring the rain down and he had the power to do, so many things. So Sandeep, now there is a pandemic around the world. And, looking at it today, there are second lockdowns happening in Europe. Yesterday was the highest ever a number of cases in a single day in the United States of America. So this story is far from over. As a musician, what kind of emotions does this evoke on you, and what are you singing nowadays that sort of mirrors what the world is going through? Because you're a thinking and feeling person. Hopefully, you're not a competitive person who has to tick a certain, checkbox with numbers out there. So, would really love to understand, what music is emerging inside your heart when you see all this, pandemic news around you.
Well, first of all, I should confess that I'm only human, and even artists, musicians are mortals, and we're all human. So we do look at those numbers as well. And we look at the YouTube views and the Instagram followers, and all of those numbers are metrics, which for better or worse, we do follow. I think Mr. Shridhar put it so well, though. It's what are we doing with those numbers really makes the difference, right? That competition is a healthy competition, which hopefully makes us better ourselves, better each other. And don't put anybody down, but merely use it as a way to push each other to do better and be better. So in that way, I just don't want to say that give any false impression that we don't have competition or that we're any any less human. And but with regards to the music itself, I know that when the lockdown started, it was a time when I felt, okay, I'm going to take a little bit of a break, in the sense of not a break from music, but a break from singing so much, because I wanted to rest my voice. I wanted to rest my body. I've been traveling and performing nonstop for the last few years, several years, but especially the last 2-3 years. It became so much that I thought, okay, this is a time to take a slight break. Now that we're kind of back into it in the sense of, online recordings are happening, we've shifted. As I said, we had to adapt at some point. So now things are going virtual and concert recordings are happening for the music season. Practice is in full swing, classes are in full swing. I won't say that what I'm singing is any different, but I do realize, and I am fully aware that there is a shift in the mindset when I approach a concert or a recording. My first recording, I recorded first week of October, which was, after what I had a concert in probably middle of March. And then soon after was the lockdown announced across the country, and everything was put on a standstill. And so the first time I was singing on a stage, at least in a recording with other artists, was first week of October. And I remember going into it thinking, okay, well, people are watching this on their computer or on their phone or on their TV. So what am I going to sing and how am I going to sing when I don't have that physical presence, that connection of actually seeing them and them seeing me? Of course, they can see me on the screen, but there's no real-time feedback. So that was one thing that I had to really put a lot more thought into what songs I was going to sing and what order of those songs and what ragams, because I couldn't make a on the stage decision or an audible, a change to say, I'm singing this and I've planned this. ABC plan is not going well, so let's change it. There's none of that. If it's not going well, then somebody's just going to turn off their computer or shut off their phone, and I won't even know, unfortunately. But so I had to think about those sorts of things. And I remember telling my co-artists, well, it's a recording, so if I sing too much ragam, they're going to turn it off. If I sing too much of this, they're going to turn it off. If I sing in a 1.5 hour recording, if I sing one song, which is 45 minutes, why are they going to listen? And so there's this balance of there's definitely going to be people out there who do respond that way. But then there's also the people who come into it and say, that they also have not heard a live concert in 6 months or 8 months, or they've not heard a concert setting, whether it's live or recorded with other artists. So are they sort of like yearning for that? Hey, I want that ragam. I want that 15-minute ragam, and I want that 1 hour long piece that I would normally come and listen to in the sabha. Or are they thinking, I'm just listening on my phone or I'm watching it on my computer and they're cutting down? So there was a lot of that sort of planning, which we had to kind of shift the mindset. As far as the pieces themselves, I have tried to keep it the same. I think music overall either connects with people and can give a healing and can give some sort of a meditation and some sort of a relief to them, or it doesn't. And that's just individual on those people, whether it connects with them or not. So in that way, I've just tried to keep it the same as what I was singing before and learn some new songs, of course, try to present something new and fresh, which we do anyway. Unfortunately, we're going to miss that actual physical interaction which we have with people. We see them in the audience, and that's gives us so much inspiration on the spot. And that's why some venues, they say, oh, that's a special place. And some cities, they say that's a special place. And some stages or some artists we perform with, that's a special combination. Why are all those things? It's because of all of those elements that come together in that moment. So we're missing a lot of those elements, unfortunately, but at least the music, we're trying to present as much as we can. As Mr. Shridhar said, he said that he's used to seeing so many programs, the Margari Mahotsavam or so many other Margari programs. Well, we're trying to put as many as we can out there this December, this Margari season. And we hope that it'll give people some relief. It's not, as you said, it's not food for the body, but it's food for the soul. And I hope that we can connect with them and see them very soon.
Sure, Sandeep. But Sandeep, in some sense, the music that we listen to also mirrors what's happening in society. For example, when India was going through its freedom struggle, there was this patriotic music that happened. When there are festivals like Deepavali or something else, there is a different kind of music. What do you think, in your mind, is good for the pandemic? What would be music for the pandemic? And would you like to give our people who are listening to this some sample of this is Sandeep's expression of what you should listen to in a pandemic?
Hey, I think everybody should listen to everything. I don't want to, because then people will stop listening to something else. I think for me personally, it was a time of musical exploration. I worked with artists who I have never worked with before, probably because we slowed down, right? A lot of things slowed down. So three foreign tours and, more than a dozen domestic concerts that were lined up in a span of a few months all got just canceled overnight. So everybody was looking at each other, okay, what do we do? So it was a time when I also started to explore my music, and I did a couple of collaborations. And so in that way, there was some new music and new genres that we put out. I don't want to say that it was anything which is specifically related to COVID or coronavirus. It's just a time when artists were exploring, and there's an interesting thing that a lot of artists say, and my gurus have always said, is that when you set certain boundaries or some rule is imposed on you, some restriction is imposed on you, it actually forces your creativity to be more. Because when there's no boundaries, creativity, the mind goes in all directions, and you're not able to kind of bring it in and do something with it. But when somebody says, okay, well, do whatever you want, but these are the conditions, your brain has to work in such a way that you work within those conditions. And I think that lockdown and being forced to record at home, what can you record at home? What can you record with only what you have with you? What you have to only work with artists who also have similar setups that can work with you. Who you are used to performing with live may not be the best person for that. These were sort of conditions that were imposed on us, and our brains were forced to explore different things that we could do. And that's kind of where I kind of started to do different collaborations, jugalbandis, fusion mixes, things like that. And I think that was one thing that I probably would not have done, at least at this time. I would not have done it if not for the fact that we were put in this situation. And with regards to your other request of perhaps presenting something, as I said, I don't think anything specific for COVID or the pandemic or the unfortunate situation we're going through, but I can just present some music for the sake of music.
Okay, sure.
Maybe this is appropriate in a different way. It just came into my mind, so let's see. Akshaya linga vibho swayambho. Akshaya linga vibho swayambho. Akhilanda koti prabho pahi shambho. Akshaya linga vibho swayambho. Akhilanda koti prabho pahi shambho. Akshaya linga vibho.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. That
amazing, amazing, Sandeep. Amazing.
It's a small sample.
Music heals, actually.
Thank you. We certainly hope it does, not just myself, but the entire music community. I know there's been so many discussions. Like I said, we didn't know what do we do to help. We were all scrambling. What can we do? We're all used to just getting on stage. And if that helps, that's fantastic. We enjoy doing it regardless. But it was a time when a lot of us were scrambling about how do we help the world. And so I'm so happy if our music brings some healing to people around the world. And I can't ask for anything more than that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. And what you sang was so powerful. I've forgotten all the other questions that I may have had. Okay. So I think this would be a good high point in a conversation to close. But there is always one other thing, and I wanted to very quickly, 30 seconds, Shridhar and Sandeep, just hear sort of your closing thoughts. Do you think we as a people are just going to go back to where we were once the vaccine is out? Because yesterday they announced the vaccine, right? And so what is your wish? Do you want some of the good things that should stay with us, and what are those good things? Or do you fear that it's going to be back to where the world was full of conflict and competitiveness in another 6 months' time?
So, Shantanu, my wish to God is, good things like, as I mentioned earlier, compassion has gone up. So I think that should continue and increase. That's number one. Nobody should be deprived of fundamental resources. Okay?
Yeah.
There should be access to fundamental resources, access to education. Okay? And I hope in the post-COVID world, we see a very happy society and people look for eternal happiness. Okay? That is my wish.
Sandeep, your last word for you.
I think that this was a big wake-up call for the world, and they call it a great equalizer, because this was something that affected from top to bottom. You saw world leaders were infected with the virus, and so it was not just a certain group of people or a community or a certain country. It was not like that. It was the great equalizer, and I think it was a big wake-up call. I hope that we do take that with us forward. With something like a vaccine, it's going to take some time, of course, to reach all corners of the world to where we're truly out of this situation 100%. But I just hope that tomorrow we think about this time and nobody forgets this time that we are going through. Say in 2-3 years, let's say if we're 100% out of it, I just hope sincerely that people don't forget about that so quickly, and that we remember that we could very quickly slip back into something like this. Yeah. And as Mr. Shridhar said, there's certain things that every day people should just have basic essential things such as food, water, shelter. And we need to keep that in mind going forward and have that compassion, as he said as well. I'd like to just echo that, because we just need to take what's so important. And I think you asked a question. I know I'm going over the 30 seconds. If I can just bring this in really quickly. You said something about how people questioned, do I need so much? So many material things. Human nature is that there's a children's book in the US. If you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. And if you give the glass of milk, he asks for a straw. If you give a straw, he asks for a tissue or something. And it keeps going on and on. That's human nature, that we never get satisfied and we don't just stop. So let's at least make sure that the basic things are taken care of around the world. And then we can go for that glass of milk and the straw and, from there and go on and on and on. But let's at least take care of basic necessities for humanity going forward. That's my wish. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandeep. Thanks a ton, Shridhar, for this really amazing conversation. And I'm really glad we connect at a human level, even though we come from such diverse viewpoints and diverse professions. So have a good day, and hoping to catch up maybe 6 months later and figuring out where we are. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Thank you.